I've lived in China for 26 years, and consumer confidence right now is the worst I've ever seen it. It's even worse than 2022 at the height of COVID during all of the lockdowns. Now, frankly, Chinese consumers are cutting back on their spending and they're saving a lot of money for a rainy day. And the reason, Kirsten, is they're scared of two real things. The first is geopolitics. The United States and China, the tension is getting a lot worse. And we've seen how the United States, when they punish Iran, North Korea, or Cuba, that generations of innocents in those countries get hurt economically. And I think a lot of Chinese are worried that whether Biden or Trump or someone else wins the presidency next year, that China-US relations are going to be bad for the next 10, 20 years, and they're worried about being impoverished. So they're saving for a rainy day. The second reason is, as you mentioned, the real estate sector is in trouble. So my firm interviewed 25 cities, real estate agents there, and we found that stimulus measures by the government just isn't having a positive impact on housing prices. So a lot of people are concerned that economically they're not going to do well when the value of their homes go down, and on the second hand they're worried about political tension, and so everyone is just cutting back and saving for an even rainier day.
International markets have seen China-exposed stocks rise on a report more stimulus is on the way. Do you expect China is preparing to further increase its budget deficit to boost the economy? And if yes, will it work?
I don't see a major stimulus in the offing like in 2008 when China bailed out the world during the great financial crisis. The reason, Kirsten, is that China's run out of money. So there's a ballooning local government debt. Very few municipalities received any type of revenue tax last year because of the lockdowns. There were times when 400 million Chinese were literally locked in their homes during the implementation of zero COVID policies. So no business activity was going on, so local governments didn't raise any tax revenue. And in fact, they actually had to borrow money in many cases for the implementation of zero COVID. We were taking COVID tests, sometimes 3, 4. I even had 5 COVID tests in one day at points last year because of the fear of COVID spreading throughout the country. So I think the government has frankly run out of money, so I don't think they want to go into debt and launch a major stimulus anytime soon. Now, even if they were to launch a stimulus and somehow go into debt for the next 5, 10 years, I don't think that's going to have a major impact in the short term on consumer confidence because of the longer term geopolitical issues. Now, I have been one of the biggest bulls on China for 26 years, since the mid-90s when I first came to China. I've obviously painted a very negative aspect, and over the last 18 months, I've probably been one of China's biggest bears. But starting in early August, I've become more hopeful than any time in the last 18 months. You are seeing that retail sales are going up. You are seeing that industrial production is going up. So I'm painting a very negative picture, but it's much better now than any time in the last 18 months. So investors shouldn't be overly negative, and I think that market sentiment has gotten too negative in the last 6 weeks.
You've said you doubt the government is preparing a new round of stimulus, but the IMF has warned China overnight to make sure the crisis in the property sector doesn't spread. Is the government likely to act to prevent Country Garden from defaulting on its foreign loans by the end of the month?
So I don't know how they're going to be able to move to save Country Garden or other real estate developers like Evergrande or Kaisa that are at risk of defaulting on their foreign currency denominated debt. I think what the government is more likely to do is continue to push for these developers to finish real estate projects where people have already bought homes and have already started paying down their mortgages. That's from a social stability standpoint, and I think that they're going to try to bail out or do stimulus to solve the unfinished apartment crisis. That's the much more likely route. I also think the government could do more targeted small stimulus. But again, we've seen most of the rounds of stimulus so far have been tax cuts. So they're saying that you can buy a home and not pay as much tax, or they're lowering mortgage interest rates, or they're getting rid of limits on the number of homes people can buy. So historically, you can only buy 1 or 2 homes in a lot of cities throughout China. Now they're getting rid of those restrictions so people can buy 3, 4, or even 5 homes if they have enough money. But those types of targeted measures have not had a major impact on house buying yet because everybody's scared and waiting for prices to continue to decline.
You mentioned geopolitical tensions further complicating confidence and foreign investment in China. What specifically are people most concerned about? Is it the war between Russia and Ukraine, or US rhetoric on decoupling and de-risking, or something else?
The biggest concern is that the United States is trying to contain China's growth and potentially push for an overthrow of the communist regime. You see, as soon as the Chinese get good at something, like in telecom with Huawei, the United States says there's a national security risk and puts sanctions and export bans to Huawei. When the Chinese get good at solar panels or in cotton, 20% of the world's cotton comes from the Xinjiang region of China. All of a sudden, the United States says that there's genocide or forced labor in that region. When the Chinese get good at mobile apps like Temu, Shine, or TikTok, the United States says that there is a national security threat. All mostly allegations and very little evidence. So for most Chinese, they feel that no matter what China does, simply because it's growing economically, because it's starting to have more influence politically, that you're having great power fights, and the United States is imperialistic and doesn't want to allow China to grow. That's the biggest concern that Chinese have. That's why it's not easily solvable. It's not like there's a mini war going on that they can sign an armistice and everything is happy again. This is something that they feel ideologically the United States will push against China, whether it's a Republican or Democrat president for the next 10, 20 years. That's why Chinese consumers are worried. That's why they're trading down.